Representative Pino, do you have a motion on this bill?
Mr. Chair, I do. I understand that the next step for the bill will be to go to the Civil Law Committee. And so, Mr. Chair, members, I move that House File 1669 be re-referred to the Civil Law Committee as the next step in consideration in the process.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And members, thank you for your patience this past week. The decision to finally push for hearings for these two bills was not made lightly, but members, we face a crisis. In the year that these bills have been sitting and awaiting a hearing, well over 30,000 Americans, nearly 1,300 children, have died from gunshots. Many more have been wounded. These are rates many times higher than in other industrialized countries. Also in this past year, millions of Americans, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans, have used firearms for hunting, for recreation and sport, as a hobby, for personal protection. Members, we can keep more guns out of the hands of dangerous people and also uphold the rights of those Minnesotans. We can do both, we must do both, and these two bills today do just that. The first bill, House File 1669, has to do with criminal background checks. Under current law, a criminal background check applies to sales of firearms through through FFLs, federal firearms licensees, basically through dealers, but not sales through other people. House File 1669 takes the background check that applies to sales through dealers, the many sales through dealers, and applies that to all gun sales with, I should note, common sense exceptions such as transfers within the family and a number of other exceptions as well. This is an approach, members, that's in use right now in many states with different variations. It's being used right now. Having a criminal background check on all sales is supported by the great majority of Minnesotans, the great majority of Republicans, the great majority of owners of firearms. Now, as members know, outside the legislature, I serve as a prosecutor. I have specialized in domestic and sexual violence cases, but I've handled a wide variety of cases, including cases where violent felons were in possession of guns. Now, right now, a background check will prevent a violent felon or other prohibited person from acquiring a gun through an FFL, through a dealer. And that happens, by the way, about 150,000 times a year, that someone who's prohibited is prevented from getting a gun because of this background check system because they go through that door. But there's no background check if that same prohibited person buys through someone else. Members, that does not make any sense. Responsible gun owners don't want their firearms to end up in the hands of people who are not allowed to have them. Polls show that they, like all Minnesotans, strongly support having criminal background checks on all sales of firearms. So I'm going to call it my first testifier, Chief Knight.
Chief Knight, if you could state your name and start your...
Absolutely, Mr. Chair, members of the public. My name is Scott Knight, K-N-I-G-H-T. I'm the Chief of Police in the City of Chaska. I'm also a past president of the Minnesota Chiefs. I served as the Firearms Committee Chair for the International Association of Chiefs of Police for a number of years, and I'm a former chair of the National Law Enforcement Partnership to Prevent Gun Violence. I'm here representing Minnesota Chiefs today in support of what you have just heard in regard to background checks. You're aware that if someone were to buy a weapon from a FFL, federally licensed dealer, they go through a check. It's pretty well known that about 40% of gun transaction sales don't go through a background check, and which means that people who would otherwise be prohibited from procuring a firearm can and do. They can get them online, they can go to a gun show, they can go to a garage sale, they can answer an ad in the paper and get a transaction to have a weapon without knowing whether or not they're a prohibited person. Minnesota Chiefs has always, and we continue to support the expansion of comprehensive background checks. We ask you to consider this, please.
And Mr. Chair, I'll bring up the second testifier, Dakota County Attorney Jim Backstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. James Backstrom, Dakota County Attorney, member of the Board of Directors and past president of the Minnesota County Attorneys Association. I do have a handout. If someone could pass that out, I'd appreciate it. What I'm handing out is the position of Minnesota County Attorneys Association in reference to a statement of principles on firearms, which we adopted in October of 2016, but it's still applicable today. It specifically relates to the bill in front of you, the 1669 bill regarding the background checks, because we do support a common sense approach to background checks, which requires all sellers, with a few exceptions, which I'll go into, but all sellers of guns to make sure that there are background checks done. I believe the vast majority of citizens in our state and in our nation, quite frankly, support this type of a proposal. It makes common sense. The exceptions as articulated in this document would be sales for interfamilial, within a family, sales of weapons. And we would also encourage you, as you consider adopting a bill of this nature, to exclude long arms, the shotguns, the rifles that do not constitute semi-automatic type assault weapons, which we believe should always go through background checks. But those types of weapons which are used for hunting, which we have a long and proud tradition of here in our great state, we would support not changing the rules in reference to that. But clearly with reference to handguns and semi-automatic assault weapons, background checks need to take place in reference to all sales, whether they're done through a federal licensed arms dealer or not. We simply have, as the Representative Pinto alluded to, we have an epidemic of gun violence in this country. There was over 33,000 people in the United States that died last year as a result of gun violence. Over 85,000 or almost 85,000 more suffered non-fatal gun injuries. We need to adopt common sense approaches to address these issues. The second bill in front of you today, 1605, my state association has not had time to review and consider this proposal, but I believe we will support this. I personally support this proposal. Again, it makes common sense for those in situations where there is an element of danger that either law enforcement or a family member should be able to obtain a protective order to prohibit someone from possessing a firearm under those circumstances. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today and testify in reference to these matters.
And then finally, my third testifier, who serves as a pediatrician.
Please state your name for the record.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Andrew Kiragu, K-I-R-A-G-U, and I'm the president of the Minnesota chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. I'm also currently the interim chief of pediatrics and the medical director of the intensive care unit at Hennepin County Medical Center. I want to thank you for this opportunity to testify before you about the importance of the criminal background check bill that's under consideration at this time. As an intensive care physician in a level 1 pediatric trauma center, I have had the privilege of taking care of children that are critically ill or seriously injured for almost 20 years. Unfortunately, given the nature of the work I do, I see a fair amount of suffering experienced by the most vulnerable of those amongst us, our children. Death and devastating, life-changing disability are some of the saddest things that I've had to deal with. I am especially saddened when the injuries could have been easily prevented. Outrage, heartbreak, and frustration are just a few of the emotions I've experienced every time I see a child who has been senselessly injured or killed by a gun. I'm here speaking on behalf of the over 1,000 pediatricians who are members of the Minnesota AAP. As pediatricians, we are tasked for caring for the most vulnerable of our citizens, our nation's children. We are horrified by the carnage wrought on children by guns and mourn with their families. We believe that firearm violence is a serious public health issue and one that policymakers can no longer ignore, especially when firearm-related deaths are among one of the top 3 causes of death in American youth. We are here speaking in strong support of HF 1669. While no single law will stop all gun violence, expanding the background check system is a proven way to help to save lives. Background checks have prevented millions of firearms from landing in the hands of dangerous individuals. Ladies and gentlemen, you have this momentous opportunity to make Minnesota's children safer. I urge you not to waste this chance. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just to make a few concluding remarks then to this testimony.
Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I want to emphasize that this is a bipartisan proposal. At the state level, I see Representative Anselmo here is in support. Of course, at the federal level, President Trump came out support yesterday, and others as well. This is in use in a variety of states, and over a number of years it's been in use. And I'd like members just to have us be thinking about going to the airport. And there's the security line at the airport, and there's a screening that goes through to make sure that when somebody gets on a plane, we're sure that that person is going to be safe to be on the plane. Right now, we have that security line, sales to FFLs, and there's a separate access point that people can walk right on through that does not have the same sort of screening. It may be that most of the people on the plane, this is not a problem for. Each of us, it would not be a problem for. But I would feel much more comfortable when I'm on that plane knowing that there was not that second entrance that does not have the same background check as the first one. And I want to emphasize that as you hear the testimony to follow, to keep in mind that we are talking about the same background check conducted on many sales. I think the chief misspoke a little bit earlier. He referenced as many as 40% of sales not receiving the background check. I think you have some information indicating that actually it's a significantly lower percentage that do not have a background check, perhaps more like 10 to 15%. That's still a number of sales that are not receiving the background check that all those other sales are receiving, and that are catching 150,000 people a year who are prohibited from having access and should not be having access to firearms. So keep in mind, as you consider this, that this is simply proposing to have the same check that's being done right now on apparently 85% of sales. Let's make sure that that covers up to 100% and keep more weapons out of the hands of the people who are not allowed to have them. Mr. Chair and members, thank you so much for listening to this testimony.
Representative Pinto, thank you. At this time, I have Rob Doar.
Mr. Chair, should I stay up here? Would you like me to go back to my seat? What's your preference?
That would be your option.
Stay here. That's okay with you.
Yes, works for me.
I'll stay out of your way, though.
Please state your name and begin.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Rob Doar, D-O-A-R, and I represent the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. I'm the political director. We speak on behalf of Minnesota's 2.5 million law-abiding gun owners and advocate on their behalf. First off, I just want to say that we do believe that this bill is unconstitutional. And while I understand that not everybody sees it that way, I want to try to appeal to a little bit of logic. We heard here that there is an epidemic of gun violence. I'd like to point out that from the 1990s, our firearm homicide rate is lower than 50% of what it used to be. We are moving in the right direction. At the same time, gun sales and permit to carries have skyrocketed. And I think we are moving in the right direction. Another thing I'd like to point out too is that 78% of our gun deaths are suicides. That's tragic, but the strategies to address gun violence and the strategies to address suicides compared to violent crime are vastly different strategies. There's not a catch-all. And I believe that conversation is worth having. You've heard that the vast majority of gun owners support proposals like this. We conducted a survey of our membership last year, and once we applied the specific language of this bill and bills like it and the restrictions, there's 95% opposition to bills like this. People generally support the idea of background checks, but when you talk about the restrictions on transfers, the restrictions on loans, loaning somebody a firearm to go hunting for the weekend, that's when they start to really fall off, once you actually address the specific issues. I'm glad that Representative Pinto corrected the 40% of gun sales happen without a background check. That number's been debunked over and over again. It's a 20-year-old survey of 250 people that included data prior to background checks becoming law. The Washington Post has given that lie 4 Pinocchios over and over again. I also wanted to say that we do have empirical data. Washington State has recently enacted universal background checks, as they call it. And they've identified that 2% of their sales, their transfers, have been through private parties or third parties. So there's numbers that say 10 to 12%, but the empirical data shows about 2% from Washington actually go through private parties. We know through the Department of Justice studies that the vast majority of criminals get their firearms through straw purchases. The guns are going through background checks, but they are strategically and feloniously abusing the system in order to get those firearms. This bill does not address that. There's a lot of other things that I could go into. I think I want to make sure that we get the opinions of some of our other members here who want to speak in opposition to this bill. But I'm happy to answer any questions. You guys can find me in the halls. I'm here every day, and it's not too hard to miss me.
Thank you. Ben Rust.
Morning, Chair Johnson and the committee. Thank you for allowing me to testify today. My name is Ben Rust. I'm the General Counsel for the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. As you've already heard, often these debates devolve into a battle of statistics, and the personal stories of how these laws actually affect people are lost. I'm here today to tell you the story of my client and friend, Abdul Qadir Mohammed. I practice primarily in the area of wills, trusts, and probate, but through some unusual twists and turns, I found myself doing gun trusts. As an outgrowth of that practice, I started getting calls from people who tried to buy a gun at a gun shop and were denied. And that's how I came to know Abdul Qadir Mohammed, or as his friends call him, Abdul. Abdul was born in Somalia in 1984. I don't recall from our conversations when he first came to the United States, but he's lived in St. Cloud, or moved to St. Cloud in 2000. He became a citizen of the United States in January of 2013. And the reason I know that is because it appears in the affidavit of identity that I prepared and submitted to the FBI on his behalf. You see, Abdul tried to buy a gun, but was flagged as a prohibited person. This surprised him because he's gone through an extensive background check to become a citizen. He has a permit to carry a handgun from the state of Minnesota, and he's also licensed as an armed security guard in the state of Minnesota. And yet he did not pass the background check. The reason Abdul was licensed as a security guard is so that he could provide security for the Dar al-Farouk Islamic Center in Bloomington. After his transfer was denied, Abdul spent weeks going from lawyer to lawyer. None of them were able to help him until he came to me. And he and I met probably a half dozen times. We spent many hours going through the records to try and get his record cleared. It involved getting certified court records from multiple states. We went through it. We were able to successfully submit a NICS appeal. And his denial was overturned. The date on the letter was July 11th from the FBI. But that's not the end of Abdul's story, because then the overturning of the NICS denial only applies if it was done within 30 days. Abdul tried to buy his gun April 30th. So he had to go back to the gun shop and start all over again. And sure enough, on his second attempt to buy a gun, he was denied yet again, and so he had to wait. He was not able to actually obtain a gun until July 28th of 2017. On August 5th of 2017, Dar al-Farouk Islamic Center was bombed. And I'm not here to tell you that my client could have prevented that bombing if he'd had a gun and was providing armed security. Rather, I mentioned that bombing to show that there is and was a real need for security there, and that the man standing ready to provide that security couldn't obtain a firearm to do it because he didn't pass a background check. Under current law in Minnesota, Abdul could have obtained a gun legally through a private sale. If universal background checks are enacted, he would not have been able to do that. And the process in Abdul's case happened rather quickly, I mean, startlingly quickly. If you talk to other firearms attorneys, they'll tell you that those processes take 2 years. In fact, it says that right on the letter that another client of mine with a Muslim name received from the FBI. That's a long time to wait to exercise a constitutional right. I don't think that's fair. As you're considering this bill, I know there's a lot of statistics, but I would ask that you just remember Abdul, think about his story, and remember that this law affects ordinary people. Thank you.
Daniel Ward? Please state your name for the record.
Daniel Ward. I am the Vice President and Director of Membership for the African American Heritage Gun Club here in Minnesota. And I just wanted to come today and give you a different perspective. When looking at guns in America, a lot of us tend to look at guns and gun clubs as being part of the old white establishment. We as minorities and people of color have traditionally been marginalized. We've been prohibited from being able to have just the basic right of being able to protect our homes and protect our families. Gun laws go all the way back to the early 1600s, and law after law after law after law after law has been passed that has basically eroded away not only our rights, but everyone else's rights. But we're the ones that get affected the most. We typically live in communities where the police, over-police, we're profiled, we live in substandard housing, we can't find employment. You just had members from another agency that talked about the number of beds in facilities, and it's a problem that exists that's not going to go away. So if you look at this total universal background check, I want you to think about the people that are going to hurt the worst. We're talking about single moms. We're talking about very low-income individuals. I don't know of any gun store that's within the city limits of St. Paul or Minneapolis. Those have all been rezoned out of the areas. The vast majority of minorities live in urban areas, not in rural Minnesota. So those individuals that are also Minnesotans and citizens that pay taxes, citizens that love this state, citizens that love their cities, citizens that are law-abiding, need protection as well. If I wanted to purchase a gun in the city of Minneapolis, I can't do so. I need to go out to the burbs. If I don't have transportation, because I'm dependent on public transportation, a lot of public transportation does not go to locations where the gun stores are. So again, I'm marginalized. I'm prohibited from being able to do this. Then as I read through this particular bill, I'm looking at just within our own club. If I wanted to sell a gun to a fellow club member, which I've known, trusted, gone to the range with, shot with, I'm not concerned about that person's going to go out and commit a crime. I know that person. I have a relationship with them. Okay? I have to then ask them to submit to a background check. I already know them. They're already a law-abiding citizen. They've already submitted to a background check. So why am I being required to do it again just to sell a gun to one of my friends that I go shoot with? That makes no sense to me. Online, we're looking at line 314. It talks about background checks by a federally licensed firearm dealer. The transferee shall appear jointly before a federal licensed firearm dealer with the firearm and the other person that you want to sell it to. If I got to hop on a bus and we're going to meet somewhere at a dealer that's out in the burbs, logistically, that's going to be very difficult in order to coordinate. So I would say that, you know, really consider some of the things here. Look at the people that don't have access. How are you making this more of a hurdle and more of a burden on them? Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Joe Olson? Mr. Olson, you have about 3 minutes.
Well, I will use up less than 3 minutes so that Ms. Cade can have a few moments, if you don't mind. She's on the other bill. Oh, she's on the other bill, but not on this one. Oh, never mind. Never mind. My name is Joseph Olson. I'm a professor of law at Mitchell-Hamlin Law School. I'm obviously not here representing them. I have been representing Minnesota's responsible gun owners at this Capitol since 1989. There really is nothing new under the sun. Let me start off with no background check can stop an evil mind or reveal undiagnosed insanity. Simply can't happen. Universal background checks haven't stopped any mass public shootings in this century. Since 2000, every one of our mass shooters obtained their weapons without using legal private transfers. Attacks such as San Bernardino massacre in California, the Umpqua Community College shooting in Oregon, occurred in states that already have universal background checks, which wouldn't have made any difference because those guns were purchased, as all of the guns that have been purchased by these folks were purchased through an FFL dealer and went through the NICS check. Every one of these transfers. The gentleman in Virginia Tech passed, the gentleman in Northern Illinois passed, the gentleman in Aurora, California passed. Perhaps he shouldn't have. His psychiatrist was dithering around about whether she should report it, but she didn't get to it. But the NICS check, every one of them went through a NICS check. Indeed, there are mass public shootings in Europe. They've occurred in France, Belgium, Norway, Germany, and other European countries where background checks, much more rigid than ours, are already in place. The hole in the argument is so glaring that even some in the media have noticed it. Last year, ABC's John Carl asked the senator from Connecticut, why are we so focused on things that have nothing to do with the massacres we are responding to? Because, of course, the solution for a massacre that's taking place anywhere is to have a good guy with a gun there, able to act right now, right there. Because that's what it takes. Research in the U.S. has shown consistently that there's no evidence that any type of background checks reduce violent crime or outbursts of undiagnosed insanity. The research simply doesn't support it at all. And as the gentleman before me testified, there's an inherent bias in the NICS system against cultures where people have similar names.
Mr. Olson, if you want to finish up, the 15 minutes is up.
Oh, sorry about that. 94% of delays are resolved in 24 hours, and the feds prosecute less than 100 people a year. There are better ways of dealing with this. We already have in Minnesota a background check system that checks the person, not the gun, the person, not the transfer, and it's the person who's always the evil or insane party. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Becker-Finn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to clarify something based on the first testifier, Mr. Doar. I'm a gun owner, and you do not speak for me. And so I think it's important for folks to realize when we quote the statistic about how many Minnesotans are gun owners, that even though you call yourselves the Gun Owners Caucus, that does not mean that you've spoken to every gun owner in our state, because you don't speak for me. I've been a gun owner since I was 12 years old, and I'm also a mom. And I also think there are things we can do as we talk about good guys and bad guys. Well, the criminal background checks are to determine who those people are that you might think of as bad guys. I also want to point out, because I think you misspoke about some of the ways this would make things difficult. The bill actually contains quite a few exclusions, including for hunting and trapping at lawfully organized shooting sports competitions and at shooting ranges. So it's not quite as draconian as it initially was made out to be. And finally, I just wanted to point out, based on the last speaker, that the majority of mass shootings and shootings in general are not perpetrated by people with mental illness. So we need to stop talking about this problem in that way. There are red flags to violent behavior and violent behavior with guns, and those red flags don't necessarily have to do with folks who are struggling with mental illness.
Mr. Doar?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Becker-Finn, yes, I understand that not everybody may agree with us, but whether or not you agree with us, we do believe that we represent the interest of every gun owner in the state. And on the point about the hunting, there are some provisions for if you're within the bill, if you're within the presence, or if you're lawfully engaged. But this bill would prevent me from being able to loan a firearm, let's say, for a weekend or a season. The language of the bill says while hunting or trapping, and that's specifically engaged in that activity. If they were to take it home, they're no longer hunting or trapping, and the loan wouldn't apply.
Representative Becker-Finn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is patently false to say that you speak for every gun owner in the state of Minnesota. I'm telling you now, as a gun owner, that is untrue. So we need to stop saying things that are untrue.
Mr. Doar?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Becker-Finn, again, I did not say we speak for every gun owner. I say we represent the interests. So you may disagree that we represent your interests. I believe we do, with respect.
Representative Becker-Finn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've spoken to many other constituents, family members, people that I work with. Those aren't our interests. It is false to say that. You can say that you speak for your organization, but it is patently false and untrue to state that you speak for the interests of all gun owners. You do not.
How about if we settle to agree to disagree on this issue?
Fair enough.
Representative Dean?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The testimonies in some way were reasonable, in some ways really offensive. The emeritus professor spoke about the mass shootings and that those individuals have passed background checks. There are many other people that are shot and killed by guns that have been purchased through private sales, have been purchased through private gun shows in Hennepin County, at the administration building, in the courts building. An individual was shot by someone that was able to obtain a gun through a private gun show, private sale in a gun show. So to make that accusation that it won't stop individuals is, I believe, not true. And I've heard the many arguments, well, someone wants to kill someone, they're going to find a way. In the case of mass shootings. Clearly, good guys with guns don't stop them. At Parkland, there was a school resource officer, deputy, that never went into the building, and there were several other deputies there. So when we make these accusations that a good guy with a gun will stop these things from happening, that again is not true. And the argument can be made that, well, we can never regulate, we can never, do things to restrict people because they're always going to do that. And I would agree. There are always going to be people that will do that. But if we reduce the ability of individuals who shouldn't have guns to get guns, it will then reduce the amount of people that we are seeing shot and killed by guns every day. So, Representative Pinto, I think this is a great bill. I would hope that we would be able to move in the directions what other reasonable states have done. I actually think this bill doesn't go far enough. It still allows people to obtain semi-automatic weapons, weapons that have predominantly been used in mass shootings. And I've heard the arguments that, people use AR-15s for hunting deer. And I would say if you're that bad of a shot that you can't get them in 2 or 3, maybe you shouldn't be able to get a deer license.
Representative Uglum?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's been great arguments on both sides of this bill, and obviously the lines are drawn both ways here. It's a complicated issue, and there's been lots and lots of debate. And, there are real good reasons on both sides to either pass this bill or not pass this bill. There also are other bills making their way through the system here in the House and in the Senate in this session. And I think it's prudent upon this body that we look at all the bills that are coming through before we make a decision. And I just don't think it's prudent to act on something right now, Representative Pinto. You're well-intentioned, but to do something as big and as hard a decision as this in 15 or 20 minutes gives me pause. So therefore, Mr. Chair, I would make a motion to lay this bill on the table.
There's been a motion to lay the bill on the table.
Finish discussion first?
This is a motion.
This is not
I would
debatable.
request a roll call, Mr. Chair.
Roll call has been
And
requested.
Mr. Chair, you said that the motion is not debatable?
The motion is not debatable. Call the roll, please.
Johnson,
Yes.
Lomer,
Yes.
Hillstrom,
No.
Beckerfin,
No.
Considine,
No.
Dean,
No.
Frankie,
No.
Grossel, Howe, Lucero,
Yes.
Newberger,
Yes.
O'Neill, Pinto,
No.
Uglum,
Yes.
Ward, Zerwas.
There are 9 yeses, 7 noes. The motion has prevailed.